Now, this morning we are doing a new series called The Best Summer Ever. All right? The best summer ever. And we're going to remember maybe when you talk about that, what it does is you think about some of the best summers you ever had. I know that I did. I went back and think, wow, had some great summers. In fact, when I was younger, and that was a long time ago, but when I was younger, and I just couldn't wait for summer. School's okay, but summer was the best. And, it was like we could go out and you didn't have to have a hall pass to go to the bathroom. You didn't have to have all kinds of things that school did. And the only law really my parents had, they had other things, but you go out in the morning and just be in by dark. They didn't want to come looking for you. So we were out all day. And yes, we drank from rubber hoses and other things like that. And we played. And it was a time that where we lived, it was all farmland around us. And we would go for miles. And when I say miles, I mean miles. We would just go on. We had forts and all kinds of woods. Right now is a great time because wild raspberries are all in. And we would get sick and diarrhea from eating so much of it. And, and it didn't matter, it just was, that was the way it was. And it was just a ball. And I think back on it, and it was fantastic. Then, when I became 11, I turned 11, I was offered the opportunity to pick strawberries for Brown's Orchard. Earl Brown was then running the whole thing. He was, I think, the original Brown. And so we picked strawberries for 10 cents a box. And it was basically, early spring, early summer type thing that we picked them. And if you did good, if you were productive, you might be asked to go into the orchard and work all summer long. So that was the goal. And it was a challenge because at 11-year-old, you're in there, you're picking, and suddenly a strawberry hits you smack on the head. And we had some classic battles. I'm sorry, Mr. Brown, he's in heaven. And, we wasted a lot of strawberries sometimes. And but somehow I was asked to be in the orchard, and I worked for Brown's till I was 18. And, we worked even into the fall. After school, we go to bring apples in, grade apples. In the early spring, we'd clean up from doing the trimming and everything in the evening and on Saturdays. It was a great time. It really was. And it was a time that I learned what earning money was all about. Because, by the way, to let you know, we're going to talk about work this morning. Isn't that exciting? Everybody's this week's vacation and stuff, and I'm going to talk about work. And but work's important. It was important to me then. Before that, we got an allowance if we did our chores and stuff at home. It wasn't a lot, but it was a way to learn about money when we were young. And then my dad used to do a lot of tree trimming. He did a lot during the summer on Saturday. And in the fall, and Gary and I, my older brother, would go along, and we'd have to rake up the leaves and clean up the brush after he got it all cut up. But that was working for your dad. That wasn't like working for somebody else. But then we're in high school. And we're going to have graduation pictures, a couple graduation at the end of the service this morning. So they're going to tell you, stay sitting, or after the last song, we can sit. I don't want to show you my graduation picture. All right? 1971. And in the yearbook, they'll tell you different things about people, right? What you're like, in that Dallas town, it was your nickname. I was Big Mac. Now, it's not because I ate a lot of hamburgers. There were 4 McWilliamses, all boys, in the same grade. And though I was an inch taller than I am now, I used to be 5'9", but somehow I lost an inch along the way. I was the tallest one of the McWilliamses. So they called me Big Mac. All right, just to let you know, I wasn't that tall, but all of us had sort of squirrely names. And it says that I took the college prep course because I intended very much to go to college. And then it says, desire to be in medical practice. What I wanted to be was a neurosurgeon. Now, I don't know why you're laughing about that. To me, I was dead serious. In fact, it's the only reason I took college prep. I'm going to be this neurosurgeon. And I was amazed with cutting into your head. And I actually participated 2 years, I think it was 2 years, I know it was at least 2, in the Dallastown Science Fair. And in the second year, I won the science fair for biology. And then was asked to go to Harrisburg for the state science fair, at which I won nothing and came home, which was fine. It was a great privilege to go there. But one of the things that I did, and to give you an idea why I was so into neurosurgery, is I worked to actually transplant a nucleus from an amoeba into another amoeba. Which you say, why would you do that? Just because. Because it's like putting a brain into somebody. That's what it was. The nucleus controlled the amoeba. And probably 1,000 failures. I had to create my own instruments out of glass, very fine but strong enough to puncture the membrane around the amoeba, and then take a nucleus and put it in and see if it lived. And it happened. I did it. After 1,000 little buggers would just sort of explode when you punkered, one didn't. And that amoeba had 2 brains. And it was interesting to watch. So I was all excited, all right? That was my goal. So I know you think, all you did was run heavy equipment. Yeah, yes, I did. That's what I turned into. But it's interesting to go back, and some of you in your yearbook, it would be interesting if you went back and say, this is what I wanted to be. I bet you that every one of you could tell me what that was. Because if you remember when you're junior or senior in high school, you're going to change the world, right? You're going to have worldwide impact. I wanted to cure diseases. I wanted to help people who had mental issues that were physical. And maybe we could do that. But then I started to make too much money. And I'm not kidding about that. I had a summer job, and between my senior year, and I was tired of school after my senior year, I really was, and I drove, they called it buggy. If you picture a fire truck, a big long one that you often see in cities, and they have a driver in the rear, that's what I drove, but not a fire truck. We hauled concrete beams that would be 80 to 90 foot long, and I would steer the back. And it was an extremely high-risk job because of the tremendous weight, but they paid ridiculous. And there were times that summer and into the next year that I would make $2,000 or more a week. Now, you're talking 1972. And it was like, don't need to be a neurosurgeon. Don't have to go to school for 12 more years. I'm making it. And I gave up on the dream, and in about 2 years, people quit using concrete beams. So I went into construction. All right? Now, I'm telling you all that because if we think about our work and things like that, we often think, man, I remember my first job, and I remember this. And, we say we're picking strawberries for 15 cents a box. And strawberries at that time, yesterday at market, they were $7.95, all right? And I think we were $2 or $1.95 for a box or $1.50. So it's a different time. You can't compare it. We didn't make the wages. I worked in the orchard and got $1.50 an hour, all right? And most of us, we just like, how did you ever make it? Well, because things didn't cost that much. Everything's relevant. If you don't know that by now, it seems like every time you get a raise, you realize every time you go to the supermarket, everything's up. So often, everything is relative. And sometimes we get discouraged when we think about work because it's like work becomes a battle. And what I want to talk to you about this morning, and what's about this whole series, is so often we'll look at it and we struggle over summer because we want to go away, we take vacations, we have these holidays that come up and it's great, but we growl and moan a lot about work and fail to see that really work is a gift. The ability to work is a gift. And I know you're saying, my employer paid you to do this sermon, didn't he? No, he did not. This is all biblical. And I'm saying it for a couple different reasons. I work construction, and we worked hard. Not near as hard as my great-grandfather did, because they didn't have the innovative machines to do it. But we worked hard, and it didn't kill us. But I knew people from accidents, from handicaps, who wanted to work desperately, but couldn't do it. I shared this before. I actually met a neurosurgeon down in Maryland. This is a true story. I am grading on a big loader around his house. He built a new house. It was magnificent. Didn't know he was a neurosurgeon. And he's sitting watching all this going on. So at lunch, we stopped. I'm sitting on his porch. We're eating lunch. And he says, that looks like so much fun. Is it as fun as it looks? And I'm like, no, it's sort of work. And could you tell your mother? And I found out it was his mother. And she didn't speak English. She was Asian. And she was constantly getting in my way. I was convinced I was going to run over her. But if she saw like some garbage or a limb that we would normally just sort of cover up, she was grabbing it. So she's constantly in my way. And I'm telling you, can you get your mom sort of get out of the way because I don't want to squish her? And he laughs and said, I don't know if she'll listen to me. And he said, it just looks like fun. Well, I said, what do you do? And that's when he said, I'm a neurosurgeon. And I think it was at Hopkins, is what he said was the hospital he went. And this guy's, whoa. And I'm thinking, that's what I wanted to be. Looking at the house and say, I missed it. You know, that type of thing. But he said, I take and I hold the lives of people in my hands. And it's so stressful. It's so difficult because they're depending that I get it right. And the brain is so difficult. And it's interesting, I'm thinking, boy, wouldn't I like to be that? And he is thinking, I wish I could just do that. And just sit there and I don't have anything else to worry about. And I'm thinking, I don't want to knock your house down. Those kinds of things that go on. So no matter what our job is, somebody's probably watching us and saying, I wish I could do that. That looks like so much fun. That looks so interesting. And yet, we don't get a whole picture, do we? Work is a gift from God. It really is. The ability to do it, no matter what it is a gift from God. I'm amazed at some of you, at what you do, at how you do it, how well, how easy you make something look that just boggles my mind. I'm amazed at some of our young people who are so used to technology. And I know some of my grandchildren, and they'll say, oh, Papa, I'll do this. Boop, 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 boop. It's done. And it's like, how did you do that? Don't worry, if you need me, I'll do it again. It's the way it is, isn't it? It's the thing that's so neat to me is we're all important to our culture, to our world. You're important to the church. It's why knowing your gifts, what God's gifted you to do, is so important. Because if you don't do it, it's probably not getting done. And the body is hurt by you not doing your gift. I got basically 4 topics. I just want to talk about work. And the first one is work is a gift from God. Many people, if I was to say that to you, and you might already thought and say, work's not a gift, it's a curse. It goes way back to the Garden of Eden when we were cursed, but that's not true. Work was not part of the curse. In fact, Adam and Eve were working in the Garden of Eden long before sin took place. It was God who placed Adam and Eve in the garden to cultivate it, to tend it. That means work, right? Cultivating, tending. And I can tell you, after working in an orchard, it's work. It doesn't, you say, oh, it's easy, just pick the fruit that grows on the trees. Nope, it's a lot more to it. And anybody that farms or grows fruit or other products or animals, you know it's work. And it's constant. And you're taking care of things. So Adam and Eve, that's what they were doing. They were involved in work. And knowing that God created, because God works. He's created to work. Everything He does is a work. Work is an expression of obedience to God. It's a way of honoring Him, of fulfilling the assignment that He has given us when we were created. Now, work got more difficult with sin. Weeds came, thistles, plowing got difficult because the earth, instead of being constantly moisture in it, it would dry out and get hard. Mankind's disobedience changed work to much more of a struggle, not only to provide substance, but a struggle against what sin did to creation. We think it's just mankind, but sin affected creation. The curse is the painful toil required to produce from the ground. The curse has the second law of thermodynamics. What is that? Things deteriorate. If they're not kept up, things deteriorate. That's the second law of thermodynamics. But the curse is not work. It was a gift to Adam and Eve long before the fall. And I think it's important for us to remember the beginning, even as we wrestle with the significance of our work in our culture today. When God looked at creation, He said, this is good. This is good. When He created man, He said, this is very good. This is really good. He liked what He created. And despite the rebellious nature of humans, God did not choose to erase us. He didn't say, I'm going to start over with something different. He chose to redeem us. True, like everything else, work was dramatically affected by sin's entry into the world, but its importance to the order of God's creation remains. Work is really a holy endeavor to those who are redeemed by Christ. We go back to Genesis, and let me read just a couple verses from chapter 1, 2, and 3. In chapter 1:28, it says, "And God created man in his own image. In the image of God, he created them, male and female. He created them. And God blessed them. And he said to them, 'Be fruitful and multiply.'" Amazingly, that's one of the commandments we really followed. Be fruitful and multiply, and fill the earth, and subdue it, and rule over the fish of the sea, and over the birds of the sky, and over every living creature that moves on earth. In Genesis 2:15, then God took the man and put him in the Garden of Eden to cultivate it and to keep it. Before the sin, before the fall, man worked. And then the fall, Genesis 3:17 and 19, the Lord said to the man, "You listened to your wife and ate the fruit I told you not to eat. And so the ground will be under a curse because of what you did. And as long as you live, you will have to struggle to sow enough food. Your food will be plants, but the ground will produce thorns and thistles. You will sweat with all your life to earn a living. You were made out of soil, and to the soil you will return." But we need to understand the ability to work is a gift from God. We are not what we do. That's not our identity. We are not what we do. We are not our job. That's important. That's the only way we keep a balance in living, is we realize really who we are. But our work, what we do well, gives us some sense of self-value. Because we are God's masterpiece. Scripture says that. We are His masterpiece. And what we do, what we work at, if we do it right, will honor God. Second, we're made to work hard. We always see this picture. The little, chubby little angel playing a harp, floating on a cloud. And we think, is that heaven? Is that what heaven's going to be like? Now, I want you to really think about that. You're floating on a cloud. You might get a kick out of that for a little bit, but for how long? How long is that going to be fun? I don't know about you, but maybe half an hour for me. We're going to get bored. How many of you, your kids can't wait to get out, right, for the summer? How many of them are already saying, "I'm bored"? Anybody? Any kids saying that? "I'm bored." You know, I know they do. I've already heard it in grandchildren. It's, "I'm bored. We got nothing to do." And it's like, that's us. Well, when we get to heaven, what little scripture there is about what we're going to do in heaven tells us we're going to be working. We're going to be doing something. We're not going to sit there and suddenly turn into a fat little baby who sings on a harp. That's not what it's about. That's not what heaven's about. I mean, there may be cherubims, and they may be fantastic, and it'll be exciting to meet them, but I'm sure they do more than just float around playing on a harp. And we're not going to do that. We were created from the beginning to work, and in heaven we'll be back in that perfect conditions, perfect situations, to perfectly do what we were created to do. Isn't that a neat thought? It is to me. I don't care. Put me back in a heavenly 953. I would love it. And it never hits and breaks anything or, gets too close to the wall and cracks, Not that I ever did any of that. At least not real often. That's the kind of job. I mean, think about it. It's amazing. We'll be able to do that. In Psalms 104:23, it says, "Then that man will go out to his labor, to his work, and he'll labor unto evening." It means we work. We work hard. We stay at it. A lot of people in our culture are afraid of work. Thomas Edison says, "Opportunity is missed by most people because it's dressed in overalls and looks like work." The truth is, you and I were made to work. Work does not hurt us. I'm not talking about abusive work. but work. And like I said before, we don't have the hard work. I see pictures and being into construction like I was, and I love it. And I would look at how hard people had it before. How did they do the things that they did? I'm amazed when you see the pyramids and the structures from 5, 6, 7,000 years ago. How did they do that? They didn't have cranes. They didn't have the things that we have. How did they move the amount of dirt? When I started in construction, the first machine I ran was an International 150. It was a track loader, wasn't very big, and it was very crude by today's standards. When I say crude, there was a steel bar about that wide. You put a pillow on it. That was your seat. So anything you went over jarred your whole body, okay? As I sat there in the seat, give me a quick lesson. I had 2 handles in front of me. They were clutches. Some of you may remember this. You had a clutch and 2 brake pedals down here. This side operated this track, this side operated that track. Up here were your bucket handles. Over here was your forward and backward shifter. Now, when you wanted to turn and you were cutting something, you had to use this arm and try to work both levers, push a brake, which was hard. This was not power. You were pushing with everything. My legs used to have a big hump right here, like a muscle. Okay? It did. I had sort of deformed legs because this muscle was huge. It's got a lot smaller since I'm not pushing these pedals. So you're trying to run the bucket with this hand, disengaging the clutch, pushing the brake, and you were doing this all the time. You know, and the clutch was not an easy clutch. It didn't just flow back and it was so easy to hold. No, it bucked you at every turn. It wanted to stay engaged. When I left construction in 2008, our Cat 953 loaders had what was called a pressurized cab. The reason it was pressurized, it was completely sealed. You could work in Canadian smoke, and none of it would be in your cab. None of it. I mean, when I would come home in the early days, I would basically undress on the stoop out back of the house and watch mud come off of me. That's how dirty we get, because dust was all around you, running them. These new ones, the seat is so much designed that when you sit on it, it's like, it goes like this. And it has shock absorbers. And it goes all the way up your back. And it's so comfortable. And no matter what you do, when you go over bumps and stuff, it just, It has 2 pedals and a center brake. They do everything. And now they make them electric over hydraulic so that you barely touch them and it takes and spins that thing around on a dime. And the hydraulics are so easy to operate. It's irritating. I'm used to resistance, and we always felt how a tractor operated through the resistance of the hydraulic. Well, the new electric over hydraulic takes it away, and you have to learn how to sense what the machine's doing all through engine sound and your gut. It's very different. It's air conditioned. It is heated. And it has a wonderful stereo system. The guys that are getting in those machines now have no idea what work is. I think it's fantastic. I really do. That's innovation. And you can do a lot of work because we have new innovations. And it doesn't matter what it is. Everything is affected by newer innovations, isn't it? My wife, I think about it. How often today my wife will say, "Oh, I'm tired, did a lot of washing machine today." And I said, "Didn't the washing machine do it?" She doesn't like that. And, I walk around and sweep the house most of the time that I do it, and it can get tiring because I often do it when I'm tired and get to it, but that sweeper does pretty good. I just have to walk around with it. It's pretty amazing. And now we got robots that go in and say, "Oh, that's cool. That's cool. What are you doing, hon?" "Oh, I'm sweeping." Go over there, iBot. Right? It's amazing what we have. It really is. And I believe people still work very hard, and a lot of people work extremely hard with their minds. And a lot of jobs today, where you may not be doing physical labor, we're doing something to us that isn't very healthy, and we're creating stress levels that are not healthy. You were better working hard physically than what stress is doing to the body today. And I'm concerned about that. I know what stress is. Being a general manager of our construction company and facing some of the things there, sadly, there were Sundays, and my wife would tell you this, my boys would tell you that I dreaded that Monday was coming. Dreaded it. Because if we didn't get this done and that got, and we were in trouble and this and that, and it was just constant struggle to do and produce. We're pushed more and more that way because we have innovation, we have a lot of ways that we work differently, and often with less people when we sort of need more. Not everywhere. And today we have a crisis of people being allergic to work. Here's what I think. I think scripturally, Christians should be the best employees on anybody's job site, in any company. I think Christians should be the best employers that you could ever work for. Not every job requires physical labor. Like I said, there's many jobs that depend on all kinds of things. But Christians need to have an impact where we work. In Colossians 3:23 and 24, it says, whatever you do, that eliminates any excuses or this isn't important. Whatever you do, any kind of work you are doing, do it heartily, with all your heart. And all the different ways that play out in Scripture with Christ-like character, with honesty, with diligence and integrity and humility. So work heartily, not for men, but for the Lord. I believe, as Christians, we should not be the ones complaining and moaning. Let me tell you something. If you work for a company where all you're doing is complaining and growling and not liking the boss and things like that, do yourself and the company a favor. As a Christian, find another job. It's that simple. Quit thinking that this is the only job you got. If you are that miserable that it's affecting your Christian witness by you being a complainer, a moaner, doing the minimal thing you do, for God's sake. And that's what I mean. For God. We're working unto the Lord. Find another job. It's important. It's essential. We need to learn to use our work also as a platform as a Christian. Another translation of the verse I just read from Colossians 3:23-24 says it this way: do your work willingly, as though you were serving the Lord Himself, and not just your earthly boss. In fact, the Lord Christ is the one you're really serving, and you know He will reward you. So you may not have a Christian boss. You may not have an understanding, nice boss, but we're really working for Christ. So if your job is okay, you're good with it, you're not going to leave it, don't complain about it. Work for the Lord. Do it for Him. That's what that's saying. And I think one of the things that we miss is how much time we spend at work. 40 hours a week, many of us more. My average week working for Calvin was 50 to 60, sometimes 72 hours a week that I was away. That was during day. That was during active times. All right? And we have a tremendous opportunity to be a witness for Jesus Christ. I don't think on your job is the place where we take the time to evangelize. I'm going to tell you that point blank. I don't think that we are paid to evangelize other people. You say, whoa, wait a minute. I think we can share. I didn't say we couldn't share. I didn't say that. But I think it's a very different place when people try to put a notch on their belt or win people and take up time away from what they're being paid to do. I don't think that reflects well on our Christianity. You know, Paul, everybody thought Paul was a prisoner, and we just talked about that through our last series. And yet Paul's chained to 2 guards 24/7, and he's looking at it, I'm not the prisoner, they are. And it's amazing the impact that he had on the Praetorial Guard. That was the emperor's guard. And while Paul was there, almost all of the Praetorial Guard became Christians and gave their life for Christ. He had a way of doing that. I think work is a great platform to show and witness by our lives. By our lives, the reflection of Christ in us. You don't have to take the time. You may say, well, I don't even know how to lead somebody to Christ. I don't know a lot of Scripture. You don't have to. The greatest testimony that we have is how we live every day on this earth. How we live at home. How we talk about home. I mean, I think about it. I'm working construction. I work with guys, every other word's a cuss word. And, you know, I would hear about home life and the wife is this and that. And if we get involved in that, that's what they're hearing from you. That's what you're going along with. And we have an opportunity to change that atmosphere. We have an opportunity not to think some things are funny, we don't have to sit there and say that's a terrible thing to say or whatever, you know, because too many Christians on the job site, I've seen them. They're judgmental. They look down on people. Or they're just as bad. Listen to them talk. I'd never know they were a Christian by their foul language. It's things like that. We have this opportunity to be different. 1 Corinthians 16:14 says we're to show love in everything we do. That's the love of Christ. Has to come out in everything we do. I have a very good friend of mine. In fact, he got me involved with the company in Maryland. And when he became a Christian, he was so on fire for the Lord. I loved him, still do. Good friend. But he really got obnoxious. If he met somebody brand new, he was inviting them to accept Jesus Christ on the second sentence. And what happened at work is so many people got tired of him because he wouldn't stop. Before he'd get to know you, he's trying to introduce you to Christ. And you say, well, what's wrong with that? There's a lot of things. And one of the things is it's important for us as Christians to walk with people, to get to know them. And they need to get to know us. And that's why how we live and how we act and how we conduct ourselves, where we work, matters. Because one of the things that I had to do is people, you know, they knew I'm a pastor. And I remember walking up on a bunch at the end of the day one time, and they're all sitting there drinking their beer. And you want to drink beer, that's fine. The Bible doesn't say anything's wrong with drinking beer. It says don't get drunk. If you're getting drunk, you have an issue. Just telling you, that's a biblical perspective. That's biblical. And these guys all try to hide their beer and say, hey, preacher's coming, hide your beer. So I said, you guys Don't have to worry about hiding your beer from me. God sees everything. You know. And then they go, oh, the preacher don't care if we drink. That's not what I meant. But from then on, nobody cared. And I'll be honest with you, trying to live for the Lord in a construction site or any job, and I tried to do this on virtually every job I had. My early jobs, I wasn't a Christian, so I can't claim them. But after I became a Christian, it changed the way I worked and related to people. But I told you before, these big, these strong, these hard-talking, beer-drinking, whiskey-guzzling, pot-smoking construction guys would come to me in tears over a home problem, over one of their children, and ask me, what should I do? And they opened the door. They opened the door. And they were ready to listen. And lives got changed and got affected. And we have to be the thermostat, the atmosphere that creates that by the way we live. Not judging, not looking down, but engaging and loving and living for Christ. Our workplace offers this as a tremendous opportunity. And then I think God calls us to enjoy our work. I think this is important. God wants us to enjoy what we do. One of the things I can tell you, and if you've been here, you've heard me say it before, one of the great things about working construction is, even before I was a manager and I was running equipment, take the house that's getting built down here, right here. That's like what I lived on, right? We would get sent in. I'd get one of the first, strip the lot of topsoil, dig a foundation. At the end of the day, I could get out of my machine and I had a sense of accomplishment. You know what I mean? It was done. It's right. It's ready for the people to come in and put the footers in. At some point, I would probably be back on that property, backfilling it, grading it out so all the water runs. At the end of that time when it was done, something was accomplished. Now, many of your jobs, you have that. You can get that sense of accomplishment, and it matters. It makes you feel good. And one of the hardest things in my transition from going, like I was pastor I've been involved in ministry since 1976, and then when in whenever it was, 2009, 10, when I went full time, pastoring's like being a parent. Parents, think potty training. When you set them on the potty and said, this is what you do, did that work? Did they instantly get it? No. They'd pee in their pants, they'd poop in their panties, and it's like, this isn't going well. There's no sense of accomplishment here. We're going backwards, right? I mean, I was convinced our oldest was going to go to school, be in first grade, and be wearing a diaper. There was just no convincing that boy that this was horrible to do in your pants anymore. All right? It was years of work. And your kids, right? Parents sometimes, and they get into teens and they're on their own and you're wondering, did I do the job? Did it work? There is a long time sense of accomplishment. That's a pastor. That's a pastor. I can get up and I can preach and I go home and I commit it to the Lord. I don't worry about it, but I don't know. Did it hit? Did it miss? Did I confuse people? Was it my knees? It's a difference, isn't it? And some of our jobs are that way. Some of them are very long till we get that sense of accomplishment. But we can still enjoy our work. As a parent, Isn't it worth it? Isn't it worth it? The reward is grandchildren. And as a grandparent, it's so worth it. And you wonder, why didn't they come first? It's so much easier. We're to enjoy our work. I think it's sad if we're doing things that we can't enjoy. And sometimes we don't. When I decided back in 2008, when we closed our company down in Maryland, the recession was killing every opportunity that people had given me before. But Kinsley Construction offered me an exceptional job. The problem with the job was I had to go to Hagerstown. And if I traveled back and forth, it was a 2-hour out, 2-hour back. Or I stayed out there all week. And I had to make a choice. And I remember praying about it and talking it over with my wife. Because if I didn't take the job, there was nothing. And one of the things God showed me, if you do the job in Hagerstown, you'll make more money. But you can't keep being a preacher. You can't do this. It's not going to work. And when I realized that fact, and I will tell you this, not that I'm holy or whatever, but it made the decision for me. God called me to preach. He allowed me to work construction. And we chose to stay home. And at that point, I did anything I could. Worked at Market, started to work at Market. I worked for Sears, which was the least likable thing in my entire working career that I ever did, was working for a big corporation. But I did it. Why? And I will tell you that I disliked everything but liked it, because I liked dealing and meeting people. It was the corporate structure and things that they did that I wasn't wild about. But I was willing to do it because my family mattered to me, to meet and do whatever it takes to pay the bills. And we did that. And I'm not sorry. For most of my life, I will tell you that this is the most exciting job, if we call it a job. I wouldn't, because I'll do it if you don't even pay me. Because this is what God called us to do, and I love it. And that's what we should do, to love it. To do what, if we're creative, find a place for it. Find a place. I want to close with Ecclesiastes. Solomon wrote this. You know, Solomon struggled because he said, I wanted to get a purpose. What's our purpose in life? He says this, I have seen what is best for people here on earth. They should eat, drink, and enjoy their work, because the life God has given them on earth is short. It's short. Wouldn't you agree to that? I wouldn't if I was 5 years old, or when I was 10, or even when I was 18. I would not say that. It seemed like a long time to get to 18. Let me tell you, it hasn't been long to get to 70. Life is short. God gives some people the ability to enjoy the wealth and the property that He gives them, as well as others to ability to accept their state in life and enjoy their work. They do not worry about how short life is, because God keeps them busy with what they love to do. Work is a gift from God. Look for ways to enjoy it. And you'll worship God and see God in a whole different way. Would you pray with me? Heavenly Father, I thank you for this opportunity to begin this series and to think about work, because all of us do it. We're all involved in some work. And I ask this morning that we can see what we do in a different light. And maybe some of us, we need a change. And I ask for the strength and the courage to make a change and do the right thing. For some of us, we're going to have to go into times that are rough and difficult maybe for a little bit, but we're going to commit to you to be a provider. And then I ask for the most important thing, I think, Lord, is that no matter what we do or where we do it at, let us be a testimony for you. I ask it in your name. Amen.